I found myself to be much more interested in Part 2 than I was in Part 1. Before I get started, I'd like to kindly ask that you hit the like button, and please subscribe to the channel for more content just like this.
Pretty please, with sugar on top.
For those of you that saw my Part 1 review, I wasn't overly impressed with the 1994 chapter of this story. Maybe my expectations were too high based on all the buzz surrounding it. I honestly think it had more to do with the 1990s setting. Being a child of the 90s, I actually lived through it, so I didn't really feel like they properly represented the time in that movie. Maybe that's why I was able to enjoy 1978 a little bit more.
That makes sense.
Because all I know about the 1970s is what I know from movies. Movies like the ones that Part 2 is referencing. So the bar wasn't set as high. I didn't feel like they were unnaturally shoving the 1970s aesthetic down your throat either, like I felt like they were trying to do with the 90s in Part 1. The music is still a big part of it, but I felt like in 1978, the music moments were less frequent and much more appropriately used.
Let's broaden our minds. Lawrence? Carry on my wayward son.
The other thing I didn't like about Part 1 was all the cliches and the lack of an attempt to add something new to them. I feel like Part 2 has those 70s horror cliches, but they do it in a much more creative way. One part that jumps out to me is how the killer gets his mask. He doesn't just find it or something lame like that. One of the people defending themselves against him tried to smother him with a burlap bag. And obviously it doesn't work, but because he's an unstoppable killing machine, the bag just stays on his head. That's using what you already established about these particular killers and coming up with a unique way to give him a more distinctive look. And it actually made for a really cool moment.
I like it a lot.
This story picks up pretty much where Part 1 left off. Dina and her brother go to grown-up Ziggy's house and ask her for help with breaking the spell. The spell that now has Dina's girlfriend Sam possessed. Ziggy then proceeds to tell the story about how she survived the massacre at the camp in the 1970s. This is a very Camp Crystal Lake-like setting and everything that comes with that.
The hookers will.
You got irresponsible and horny camp counselors. You got exceptionally mean bullies. You got these urban legends that people don't want to seem to take seriously. It's all there. They even have the crazy character who tries to warn everybody before shit hits the fan. And it was actually a new take on that type of character because the person that was trying to warn everybody, who is the camp's nurse, whose daughter may or may not have already been possessed by the witch.
But you one crazy ass bitch!
Slight variations to the cliches that fit this story. The two main characters are a young Ziggy who has a bit of a rebellious streak in her, and her older sister Cindy who is a camp counselor and a bit of a goody two-shoes. There's early conflict between them and there's a bit of a backstory between their relationship, which instantly made me connect with them a little bit more. Much more so than I did with Dina and Sam in Part 1, because that was basically just teenage love story drama. This movie also has the cliche of dumb teens doing dumb things that make the situation worse.
What an idiot!
But in another slight twist, the real threat begins before that, as we see Cindy's boyfriend Tommy slowly being possessed throughout the first portion of the movie. I enjoyed this gradual descent into madness that Tommy has, much more so than I did Sam's more nonsensical and abrupt descent into madness. And when Tommy fully turns, holy shit is this guy brutal. And once again, they don't hold back on the kills, which is a great thing. Tommy even has his Anakin Skywalker moment where he kills a bunch of kids in a cabin. It's actually pretty hardcore.
Master Skywalker, there are too many of them. What are we going to do? Oh shit!
You can see they're slowly piecing together the history of the witch, and eventually what they will need to do to overcome her through Ziggy's flashback to 1978. They also explain the nosebleeds, which was another issue that I had with Part 1 that I forgot to bring up. And then we come to the conclusion, and once again, there will be spoilers here, so be warned.
You have the luxury of not knowing what I know.
So one of the camp counselors, named Alice, actually found the witch's hand. So this leads to a bit of a false finale, because the witch actually ends up resurrecting all the dead killers from the town's past. This leads to Alice getting murdered, and to Cindy and Ziggy getting surrounded in this field. There's a really well done scene where the two sisters are getting brutally stabbed to death just feet away from each other. This is right after they had a moment of reconciliation, which makes it kind of tragic actually. There's a really interesting visual of the two sisters' bloody bodies kind of reaching out towards each other. It actually reminded me of that painting on the roof of the Sistine Chapel done by Michelangelo. It's a really on-the-nose reference, but it's still pretty effective. After young Ziggy is resuscitated after she presumably died from her wounds, which was honestly a little bit far-fetched considering how many times she was stabbed.
I'm feeling woozy here!
We then revert back to 1994 and we get our tease for part 3. This comes in the form of Dina basically returning the witch's hand to her grave with the rest of her body, and then she's kind of transported or reincarnated back into 1666. I'm not sure if Dina being the main character again in part 3 is going to hold my interest. I did find her to be kind of annoying in part 1. Overall, I thought that part 2 did a much better job of paying homage to these classic movies while also doing its own thing. I found the characters to be much more relatable and likable. They answered some lingering questions while bringing up some new ones. And to me, this is closer to what I was hoping for when I heard about the concept of this show. It's not anything life-changing, but I was entertained while watching it. So believe it or not, I'm going to give Fear Street Part 2, 1978, The Pleased Palpatine. Good. So have you seen Fear Street Part 2, 1978? If you have, let me know what you thought about it in the comments down below. As always, please like, comment, share, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell for notifications, and I'll see you next time right here on Real Shift. Thanks for watching. Peace out.
Y'all be cool. Shut up.